Hello, everyone. I am Christine Gritmon, and you are here for Let's Talk About Brand. This is the show that I do every single Friday at 12 noon Eastern Time, or whatever time you are at. In fact, tell us in the comments where you are. I know that this weekend is exciting because it is Memorial Day weekend for us here in the States. So Monday's the real holiday, but it kind of gets started today. And then today, apparently Friday, it is a bank holiday in the UK. So let us know if you're watching from one of those places, if you're watching from someplace else, if you're watching the replay, let us know. And as usual, let us know if you're joining us on Twitter or on Facebook. All right, so I'm very excited about today's show. I've been meaning to have this guest on ever since I conceived of this show, so I'm very glad that we put it together. My guest today is Annette Mcdonald, and she is the founder of Easil, Easil, and that is an incredible web-based, fantastic graphic tool that can help anyone use tools, use layouts and visuals put together by graphic designers. They can hire graphic designers. They can be their own graphic designer. Annette will tell us all about it and how design and visuals really can strengthen our branding. So without any further ado, let me bring Annette on. Oh, and another thing I need to mention, Annette is very graciously joining us from Australia. It is 2 a.m, you guys. So let's make sure to give a big, wonderful, loving welcome to Annette Mcdonald. Woo!
Hey! Hey, Christine. Thank you so much for that awesome warm welcome. I can barely speak. It's 2 a.m.
You're doing so much better than, it's noon here and I can barely speak. I've had a big week. Excited
It has
for
been a
Memorial
big
Day
week.
weekend. But thank you so
Fantastic.
much for being on. You're actually my second Australian to join us in the wee hours. I had Chocolate Johnny on a bunch of months
Oh,
ago.
lovely. Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. Oh, look, we have to do these things being so far away to catch up with you awesome people, and I'm more than happy to do it.
I love it. So let's kind of kick things off by telling the folks at home about you. We know that you founded Easil, but if you could tell us about, I know you're a designer as well, so tell us a little bit about that and your journey to starting Easil.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been designing for over 20 years now, which is pretty awful to say, showing my age. But over 20 years ago, I started working in graphic design. After doing a little bit of marketing training, I decided that I wanted to do graphic design. So I started my own freelance business, and that grew very quickly to a little agency that then grew into quite a large agency where I had 30 team members, and we were doing a lot of work that was backlogged over that time. So we had all of our team were working for 2 to 3 weeks behind on client works. And as you can imagine, people weren't happy to be waiting that long for their designs to happen. And we weren't really at a stage where we wanted to keep growing and keep putting people on. So we thought there has to be a better way than this old system of, emailing proofs, getting a change from the client, coming back, giving it to the graphic designer, making that small change and going through that whole process every time. So what we did is we developed a really simple sort of web to print sort of system, which means that you could come in, make your changes to those designs, the client could, I should say, to the designs that we made, and then they could make their own changes and download those files. So it used to be called like a web to print system, and then as browser technology evolved, we rebuilt Easil into a much more powerful system that allowed more things to be changed on their design. So not just text, they wanted to change images and things like that, but still retain the design integrity that we had created. So our goal always was for our clients to be able to make their own changes, so to speed up that workflow, but to have those brands and those visuals exactly as we created them, so not looking DIY. So everything we've created has been intended to make that stuff not look DIY and always look professional and on brand.
Now, what does that mean to you? What are some of the telltale signs of kind of an unskilled DIY versus the added level of polish from a more professional design in your experience?
In my experience, I think the worst thing probably is people add a lot of stuff to their design. So our system is all about templates. So we create layouts that are nice and balanced, and they have a nice visual hierarchy in them. And what you find with bad DIY designs is that people don't do what you should do, which is replace like for like. So ensuring that if there's text on a template, that you're sticking to about the same amount of text on that template, or if you're replacing an image, that it's about the same size and the same sort of visual feel to the original. What they do is they keep adding. So instead of pulling back and thinking, I'll include some of that text in my caption, they like to include more and more in that visual. And that's definitely the big one, like having too much, no focus, and just overwhelming amounts of content on that one visual.
Yeah, more is not always more. People fear white space. People worry that it'll look plain when it actually looks clean and the eye can process it a little bit better.
That's exactly right. As we know, we've only got a couple of seconds, if that, to actually process a visual before we scroll on or move on. So you really need to get that message across quickly. And in my opinion, white space is your friend.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. So let's get to brand while we're talking about the elements. What are in fact, I think you know what I think we have a question. Yes, we do. We have a question about this from one of our Let's Chat About Brand participants from this Tuesday. Dave says, for those just trying to put their personal brand together, now this is a personal brand, not like a consumer brand, like a product, but for those trying to pull their personal brand together, where do you recommend is the best place to start with visuals, and what are the right questions to ask yourself? And I'm actually going to move this over here because it's about to be on you. So what are some good places to start?
Look, I think the most important thing is to think about how you want your customers to feel when they see you and your brand. So working out your brand's persona and your brand's personality, which, you know, that is different to a customer brand or even your own personality. So sort of melding those things together and thinking, how do you want to be seen and how do you want people to feel as soon as they see you or any of your visuals or a live video or anything like that? When they look at it and they can't hear you necessarily, what do you want them to feel?
And how can,
and when you
how
start,
can visuals really evoke a feeling? You know, because some people say that they're like, okay, well, that sounds all well and good, but how do I control how someone feels with something purely visual?
yeah, well, you definitely can. I mean, there's so many parts of visual branding that all sort of meld together to give you that experience and that feeling, from choosing the fonts to colors play a big role in it. Font pairing, so how you pair two different fonts together like you do in your brand here. You've got a script and you've got a serif font, a sans serif font, Serif font. Oh my goodness, really can't think of them in this morning. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Pairing those two fonts together, but color probably is the big one, and also the style of your visuals in terms of your style of photography. So, you know, again, how much you put into those visuals, whether you're using images of yourself, whether you're using stock images. All of that stuff really gives a feeling as to what you are and what your personal brand is. I would recommend as much as possible that you use visuals of yourself when you're building your own personal brand, but there are going to be times when you just want to post, you know, a quote graphic or a testimonial or something like that, and that's where your colors and your font pairing and all of that can really evoke a different feeling from your customer, whether you're using, you know, those light and brights or your pastels or something like your beautiful red that really is obviously your brand personality. You know, people start to recognize that the more they see that across your different platforms, across your social headers and all of those different places, all those touch points start to build your relatability and your recognition really for your personal brand.
Yeah, you really don't want to just yank someone else's quote visual off of Google Images or something and just plop it in. It does not take much effort. Once you've got your personal brand defined, your brand look and imagery defined, it does not take much effort to just put that quote on something that looks more like you.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely takes some time to get those visual elements together in the first place and to make sure that you'll be able to carry them across. I think that's a big thing that a lot of people, when they are putting together those colours and those fonts and everything, they may not think about the next part of that, which I think is really important, which is making sure that you've got some little graphic elements as well, so that you can keep consistent across platforms and not always look the same. So sometimes those personal brands, or any brand, I should say, it's not just personal, you might go too restrictive with what you actually put into your brand, and then it becomes difficult to maintain it. So what I'm talking about with graphics is little elements. So it might be, the style of line that you use. It might be, little curly dotted line or something like that, or the style of icons and things like that. So you've always got them on hand to layer them in your visuals and keep that sort of style consistent across everything, as well as those colors and those fonts and your logo. Hopefully that makes sense.
I want to go back to something that you said a minute ago, which was that, of course, if you're a personal brand, your face and your imagery should be front and center. But we also have a question from Tuesday. Emma wants to know how you feel about stock imagery and your recommendations for when you do use them, because we don't always have access to a photographer, especially nowadays, although it's opening up. But so how do you recommend wise on-brand use of stock imagery?
Yeah. Well, I think stock imagery is okay if it's not people, in my opinion. If you have to put a person on there and you're trying to build your personal brand, I think it's crazy to pull a stock image of someone else. So I think taking a photo of yourself with your own mobile phone is better than finding a cheesy stock image and using that. But there's other instances where you might be doing those quote graphics or a testimonial or something, and you're looking for a background image that fits in. And I think that's when you can really go in and pull stock images that don't have people in them. It might be styled stock or something that's more like a textured background or something like that you can use. And that's totally okay, especially if they're not overused. But I think also in terms of overused stock images, we as designers and as people in the social media space, we tend to see those images being used more, and we pick up on them more than our audience does. So don't get too hung up on using them occasionally, but definitely when you can, use pictures and videos and imagery of yourself whenever you can, layered with those little graphic elements of your brand as well.
Yes, and Tim points out that you don't want to, when doing those pictures of yourself, don't use any crappy filters that look ridiculous. unless that's part of the effect you're going for. I mean, sometimes.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think, in visuals, when you're talking about static graphics that are going on, your website or on your social media, you can do that stuff maybe more so in your reels and your TikToks and things like that, because I think if that's the way you're going with your personal brand and showing a bit of fun, I don't think it hurts to use them. But if you're taking a photo that will be a profile image or, like I said, on your website, don't go with the filters. Keep it real. Yeah. Maybe a little bit of a softening filter, but nothing too crazy. It needs to look like you.
Absolutely. Though Simon, of course, believes that people are always a mistake. Whether in stock imagery or not.
Stock images, they can be so cheesy.
No, Simon's generally misanthropic, so. So, big question when it comes to branding and visuals, and you've touched on this again a lot of it because it is the crux of the whole thing. But Marianne wants to know just kind of your top tips for maintaining consistency with your visuals. So we talked about color and we talked about font, but can we delve a little deeper into some things that you really want to define and how to figure them out?
Yeah, I think so. Keeping that consistency, like I did touch on it before, I think you really need to do some planning when you're working out your personal brand for your visuals by making sure that you've got a style of template that you can use across all of your different socials and your digital communications.
Where can we get a template, Annette?
You can get those templates at quite a few places, but I know of a good place called Easil. So as I mentioned, it's really important for us to have those sort of templates that look professional. So we have professional graphic designers, including myself, that create those templates for everyone to use, and making sure that you keep those changes that you're working with like for like. But the thing with using a platform like Easil is to make sure that you find that style of template that works for you as well. So it's all well and good to dive into Easil or any of the other platforms and look at them, and there's an array of awesome templates, but you need to make sure that they're in a similar style as well. So especially when you're scrolling through some of your social platforms like Instagram, where you see a lot of visuals at the same time, you don't want them to look, chopping and changing from one style to the next. So you can pick a template, and of course you can make those changes by changing your fonts for like, but some templates, just in the way that they're structured, don't work with other templates. So I think you really need to plan your visuals to make sure that there is consistency in how they feel. And what I mean by that might be the shapes that are on some of the templates. So you'll open up some and they've got, all rounded shapes and very light and curvy. And then there's others that are, more geometric. And you don't necessarily want to mix and match them for your own brand. You need to have that consistency of feel, because even those lines and how you use them will give that different feeling when people are viewing your visuals. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. It's funny because I love doing my own graphics because I actually do have some design training, but
Yeah.
it's so important to understand. A lot of people don't realize that the more you can define things, the better. Do you put together brand style guides for people and for brands?
Yeah, we definitely do. Yeah, we definitely do. So the main thing in a brand style guide is your logo. So your logo variations. So most people will have, say, 3 or 4 different logos. So that will consist of a landscape one, a portrait one, sometimes an icon, or maybe even a round logo version that you can use in your social profiles. Then you've got your colors. So you might have 3 to 4 different colors that you use in your brand kit. 3 to 4 fonts that work together. So you've got your main heading and your subheading font, and sometimes you've got an accent font that you use as well. So like you do, Christine, you've got your script font, which I think is always amazing to have in your brand kit because it gives some personality to your brand. And then you've got your style of imagery as well. So the way that you take your photography, whether it's, that light and bright photography, or if it's a bit more dark and moody, having all of that together. So they're the main things that people put into their brand kit. But then I think the secret special sauce is those graphic elements. So having those extra lines or those little vector shapes. So vector shapes means like SVG elements that can be scaled to any size without getting pixelated in your design. So if you have all these little graphics and things that you can layer into your designs, maybe in a corner, it just gives that sort of consistency as well. So we always make sure that we have those key elements, but also we focus on building out brand templates as well. Because these days it's all well and good to have a brand kit, but a lot of people struggle from moving from, well, I've got those fonts and I've got those colors and I've got those graphic elements, but how the heck do I put that all together and make it look good? And if
It's
you're
like
not a
having
graphic
the
designer,
ingredients, you still need a recipe.
that's exactly right. And I always use that example actually because I'm a really bad cook. And, I can have all of those ingredients. And if I choose to add something else to that recipe, or I try and, create it without doing the steps in the recipe, like I'm a goner. I cannot cook. So most people are like that with graphic design, where they need to go step by step, replace like for like, and just keep it simple. Get to know that, get familiar with it, and then maybe get a little bit more confident and try something different. But for the most part, definitely a recipe is absolutely key in cooking and in design.
Absolutely. So now, both as a designer yourself and also because you have the back end data from Easil, you know how people are using graphic elements nowadays and where they're putting their visual branding. So what are some places and ways that we should be prepared to be creating graphic elements for our brand?
Yeah. So I think another thing a lot of people are not considering when they're designing their graphics is beyond social. So
Yeah.
sometimes there's that inconsistency, like they'll get their social media graphics looking awesome, but then, I mean, where are you wanting them to go? Generally, it's to your website as well or to a store, and making sure that you're able to create and maintain those graphics on your website, which may include things like your ebooks and lead magnets, any forms, any email communications, things like, if you've got a chat bot, having little graphics in there as well. So making sure that your brand doesn't just stop at socials and thinking about that whole customer journey and how you're making them feel all the way through. Like, I like working with brands that really want to take that whole journey in one go, because we can look at it and we create little gifts for their chatbots and little, thank you emails and sequences like that all build that brand personality. And really, it's so much stronger than going piece by piece and sort of disconnecting after the social media. So encompassing everything and planning that and always building out. So I should say, don't use that as an excuse not to get started. Just make sure that you're always looking at what next. Where is my customer going and what will they be seeing at that next step, and how will they be feeling? Does my email communication, give them that same feeling, or is there a disconnect? Like, always be going through and reviewing all of that stuff so there is consistency throughout.
Yeah, I had an old logo that I didn't use very much because it only kind of worked in a square that was fairly large. Like, there was a big thing and then there was little text under it, and it just wasn't flexible for all uses. It looked very nice as like a profile, image or something for a brand specific platform, but then it wasn't flexible. So when I redesigned my logo in August, I made sure that I had a stacked version and a flat version, and I have it saved scalable in my red, but also in black, but also in white. I mean, it's so important to have flexibility with all of that. Speaking of logos, this actually was a bit of a sub discussion on the Twitter chat about brand on Tuesday, which was about, do you need a logo? And who does need a logo? Who maybe doesn't? Some people were saying that they feel like consumer brands need a logo, personal brands maybe not. I pushed back a little, saying you should at least have a consistent way that you kind of present your name. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about needing a logo versus just kind of needing a consistent graphic style?
I would tend to agree with you. I think you don't need to have a logo as such, but you need a consistent way to present your name. So it may not be as defined as a consumer brand logo, but you do need a way to display your name across all of those touch points as well. So whether it's an email signature or whether it's in your LinkedIn profile, you want there to be some way to visually link everything from one place to the next. So it could be as simple as finding a font and a color that's applied to that and using that in the same way all the time. It doesn't need to be fancy, and you don't need to have the 4 or 5 different variations that, are working across every single thing, because you would probably have less touch points. I would say at some stage, if you're offering, products or services that you need to have a tagline or something that you're applying that logo to, you definitely need to move to that stage. So keep it simple at first. Choose a nice script font or a simple font and keep it as that with just your name, and that could do as your logo. And beyond that, I would say, move towards that logo stage when you need to, but it's not a necessity at the start.
On a similar note, fonts. As you mentioned, I have my script font, Thirsty Soft. We've discussed Thirsty. I know you like Thirsty too.
I
I moved
do
to
like
Thirsty
Thirsty.
because I had been using Lobster, and then everyone in the universe started using Lobster. And I said, okay, time to move away and go with something a little less common. And I have my sans serif font, and then I use something totally different from for body copy that I haven't even really defined yet. How many fonts should people really have, and how should they properly kind of come up with that mix? Do you have any rules of thumb? The best answer is hire a designer to help you out, but do you have any rules of thumb there for good font
Yeah,
combinations?
I mean, I don't think you don't have to hire a designer for that stuff. There's a lot of references on the web to find, how to
Lots
pair
on
those fonts
Pinterest.
together. Yeah, definitely. And I mean, keep in mind that if you do create a logo, you don't necessarily have to repeat that font that you've got in that logo in everything else that you use. You can, but you don't have to. So you can create a logo like you have, where you have the two fonts, and you can repeat that script font. But sometimes you might use a font that doesn't work as well across everything, but you really want that to be in your logo, or it might really work in your logo but not necessarily in longer headings in your body copy and so forth. So I think you definitely need to research again how those fonts make people feel. We've got several blogs actually on Easil to teach people how to use those, but matching a serif with a sans serif, so serifs and sans serifs meaning the little feet. So serifs have the feet and sans serifs don't have the feet on your font. So matching a simple one with a more complex font. So when I say more complex, you would have the sans serif font, the serif font, sorry, and the script font are your more fancy fonts, and then like your guest star font that you've got on the screen at the moment, keeping those sort of simple fonts as well and pairing those two together. Don't ever use two fancy fonts together, and don't use fancy fonts like in small text. So the more complex that your font is, use that in larger sizes and never in your smaller sizes. So there's quite a few things to learn, but I mean, if you read a couple of blogs about those sorts of things and you start to see those fonts paired together, and there's tons of examples, like even if you go onto Google Fonts, when you choose a font, it has examples of how you should pair it with different fonts. So there's so many resources out there, but the thing is to really try them on a lot of graphics before you commit to them. So don't look at them, put them on one design and think that looks great, because if you don't test them with more text, you'll probably find they won't work. So
especially with the fancy fonts. When I was font shopping last August and I looked at so many font combinations, it was ridiculous, but I knew I wanted a script. So I wrote out some of the words that I knew that I'd need my font to work for, and it would work for some of the phrases and not others. You know, I knew that I was going to have this show, Let's Talk About Brand. Some of them had an ugly capital B, and if I was just writing Christine Gritmon, I wouldn't have found that out. So that's really key, making sure that it works.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So this is fun. There's like a there's like a sub conversation going on in the comments that I love. Ultimately, visual branding, it could sort of be interpreted as judging a book by its cover. And totally. We have a writer in here. We have Tim talking about, he said, I did a Twitter chat with the topic of book covers on Tuesday, and people posted their covers. Some were great, some were less so. It makes you appreciate the power of design. And Jeremy points out that, you know, we may say don't judge a book by its cover, but in terms of marketing and design, people do. So what are some kind of quick tips, not specifically for books, but on the topic of our branding is judging a book by its cover? And this will be the last question. We're wrapping up in a minute. But what are some thoughts that you have in terms of making sure that you are communicating the right thing with your design? Because people who aren't designers may not be as in tune with what creates what type of impression and feeling.
Yeah, you definitely want to, I think a couple of things are key. So balance, and this applies to book covers or any design really. So balance, so your hierarchy of the information that you want to put across. So on a book, that may be the title of the book, and then the author may be smaller than that. But also white space is your friend. So on a book cover, again, it would be like a social media graphic. You don't want to cram on too much on that front cover. Think of your book cover as your social media graphic, and maybe the back cover of your book is like your caption. That's where you're putting the bulk of your information, but you're drawing people in with that cover, and then they're turning that over or scrolling down to read more information. So thinking about the hierarchy and what people see first, drawing them in with a really strong visual on your book cover or your social, a small headline, and then getting them to take that further action by flipping over the book.
Love it. I think Tim was referring to Wholesome Media here, but it applies to you as well, Annette. You are a font.
Yeah.
Thank you so much
I love
for being here. Let people know where they can and should find you.
Yeah, absolutely. So all our socials are at Team Easil, so Easil, Team Easil. And you can also catch me on Twitter. I'm not super active. I'm just getting into the Twitter. It's Annette McD. But yeah, I'm on Facebook. I'm on all our socials and starting to get into YouTube as well. So if you need any tutorials, please let us know what you want to learn and we'll get on there and teach you as well.
Ooh, and I've got a really dangerous question to ask, Annette, and I can
Yeah.
only ask you this because I know and like you. Why should people use Easil instead of the other one?
Look, I would say the thing that most people say about us, which this is brand, isn't it? What people say rather than what you say about yourself. Most people say that our templates are higher quality and they don't look like templates. So that has always been our goal. So whilst on some of those other template sites, you can go out and create things, a lot of them you need to go and buy additional templates to go back in and edit them at that high quality. So they've got marketplaces where you can buy templates. So we work with our users to create our templates. So if there's anything missing, we put them in the catalog and we make sure that they're super high quality.
And I've
So
also personally heard great reviews of your custom design services as well. And in fact, I am almost certainly going to be hiring Easil very soon to design Instagram stickers for Christine Gritmon.
yes, we
So
didn't
we'll
even
talk
talk
about
about
that.
that. That's a whole other world. But yes, absolutely. We love gifts.
I'm so excited about that. All right, well, thank you so much, Annette. You're amazing. Thank you for being on, especially at 2 in the freaking morning. So that's a real trooper there. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
And a reminder
Bye.
to everyone that I do this show, Let's Talk About Brand, every Friday at 12 noon Eastern Time. I also have a companion Twitter chat on Tuesdays, also at noon. I love noon. So you can check out the highlights of this past week's chat. That link is in the comments there, which was all about branding with visuals. And on Tuesday, we will be talking about nurturing your personal brand and professional network. Because ultimately, keep in mind, your personal brand is the version of you that lives in people's heads. You are giving an impression of your personal brand anytime you network. So making sure that you create that right impression and nurture those relationships. Then we'll be digging deeper into that on Friday's live show. Friday's live show with John Ferrara, the CEO of Nimble. And that is a CRM program which helps you keep track of those contacts and relationships. So he is certainly a master networker. I hope you will join us both for the Twitter chat on Tuesday and for the live show on Friday. Thanks so much for being here. Bye.